DNC Chairman Tom Perez is now tasked with rebuilding the trust the organization he now leads lost in 2016 when his predecessor decided to hand over control of the DNC, a supposedly impartial organization, to Hillary Clinton's campaign long before she actually won the nomination. Now, in an interview with Chuck Todd on Meet the Press, he explained precisely how he's going to do that, and his answer really wasn't meaningful at all.
How are you going to restore trust with Sanders supporters that the DNC is going to be a fair place is going to be a fair arbiter here for the party?
Hey, I accept every test because I ran for this office because I believe in this party and I knew we needed to up our game, Tim. I'm thinking of Tim Russert.
No, a lot of us.
Because I'm a Buffalo guy.
That's
you got to understand that, Chuck. But here's my view on this. When I hear the word rigged, let's be very clear. Hillary Clinton won the Democratic primary by 4 million votes. The Democratic National Committee does not run elections for primaries. The Republican National Committee does not run elections. States run elections, and those elections were run by the states. We run caucuses, and Bernie Sanders did very well in the caucuses. Where I think both Senators Warren and Keith Ellison and myself, where we agree is we have to earn the trust of the voters. And during the process of the Democratic primary, we fell short in that, undeniably. And I accepted that responsibility. And here's what we're doing about it. Right. Number one, in the future, moving forward to 2020, we're going to be announcing our Democratic debate schedule before we know who the candidates are. Because the #1 goal has to be fair and transparent. All of our fundraising agreements, our partnerships will be available to everyone, as they were actually in 2016. And then what we have to do is make sure we're also working with voters up and down America, rural America, urban America, everywhere in between, to earn their trust.
Don't you owe the Sanders campaign an investigation? I mean, Donna Brazile put that charge out. Don't you and Keith Ellison, shouldn't you guys look back and see if her charges are true?
Well, again, I totally agree, Chuck, with the notion that the DNC fell short during critical moments of the primary. I think we have to do better, is what we have to do, Chuck. And that's why I was very clear during our primary campaign, during the campaign for DNC chair, that we have to make sure that everybody feels at the end of the process that everyone got a fair shake. That's what we're about, Chuck, and that's what we have to do.
You're not doing that, Tom. In fact, you're making matters worse, because just a couple of weeks ago, before Brazile dropped this bombshell on us, you purged a ton of progressives from the DNC. You purged anyone who endorsed Keith Ellison over you or Bernie Sanders over Hillary in 2016. So how can you expect to cultivate trust with us if you are further damaging that relationship that's already strained? Now, I do want to address some of the specific arguments he made here. He states the primary wasn't rigged because Hillary Clinton won 4 million more votes than Bernie. Okay, the DNC doesn't run primaries, states do, therefore it can't be rigged. He also says the primaries couldn't have been rigged because Bernie did really well in caucuses. He also says Bernie Sanders was offered the same joint fundraising agreement with the DNC that was offered to Hillary Clinton's campaign as well. Now, I'm going to take the time to address each of these points individually, but first of all, when I read through all of these arguments, I can't help but feel deja vu. It's almost as if I've heard the same arguments and talking points elsewhere just a couple of days ago. In fact, I did, because Hillary Clinton's former campaign manager, Robby Mook, said the same thing.
Hillary Clinton won the Democratic primary by 4 million votes.
Hillary Clinton won this primary with almost 4 million votes.
The Democratic National Committee does not run elections for primaries. The Republican National Committee does not run elections. States run elections.
Primary elections are run by secretaries of state.
We run caucuses, and Bernie Sanders did very well in the caucuses.
Those contests, the caucuses that were run by the party, Bernie Sanders won overwhelmingly.
Fundraising agreements, our partnerships will be available to everyone, as they were actually in 2016.
Both the Sanders campaign and the Clinton campaign signed joint fundraising agreements.
So that, to me, is pretty interesting, because we accused the DNC of colluding with Hillary Clinton's campaign in 2016. Turns out we were right. In fact, it went much deeper than collusion. I mean, Hillary Clinton took over the DNC, but when you're supposed to tell us that you're no longer colluding with one wing of the party over the other, when you're supposed to convince us of that, well, you have to also explain to us why it seems as though you are using the same exact talking points as someone from the Hillary wing of the party. Because when you juxtapose Robby Mook's response with Tom Perez's, it's reasonable to question whether or not they coordinated their responses and somehow met with each other or talked beforehand in order to figure out how they could best respond to the allegations of collusion between the DNC and Hillary Clinton's campaign. But maybe it's the case that I'm being really unfair to Tom here, and it's just a coincidence. Maybe they have the same line of reasoning and thinking, so they arrived at the same conclusions. Is it possible? Sure. We don't have evidence that Tom Perez met with Robby Mook beforehand or anyone from the Hillary Clinton camp to talk about what they would say and how they would specifically respond to each and every single one of Donna Brazile's allegations. However, given the past history of the DNC colluding with Clinton's campaign, I think we're not unreasonable to question why it's the case that what Tom Perez is saying here sounds really similar to someone from the Hillary Clinton camp. Now, when it comes to the substance of what he's saying, if there is any substance, he states here, when I hear the word rigged, Hillary Clinton won the primary by 4 million more votes. So that's what he's saying now, but this is what he said when he was running to be the DNC chair. We heard loudly and clearly yesterday from Bernie supporters that the process was rigged, and it was, and you've got to be honest about it. That's why we need a chair who is transparent. Did that just all go out the window? Apparently so. Now, as you'll recall, he did recant that statement almost immediately and actually apologized to Hillary Clinton supporters who he pissed off immediately, but he at least had the instinct momentarily to admit that honesty about the rigged primary is really important. But now, he completely reversed that position. And he's implying here that the primary couldn't possibly have been rigged because Hillary Clinton, she won 4 million more votes than Bernie Sanders. That's just a fact. But we're saying, Tom, that Hillary Clinton did win 4 million more votes than Bernie Sanders because the primaries were rigged. The DNC helped her win those votes and gave her an unfair advantage over Bernie Sanders. And it wasn't just the DNC. It was superdelegates. It was the media. It was Democratic Party establishment officials like Barack Obama. We're not alleging that Hillary Clinton's campaign literally changed vote totals and machines. We're saying that an organization which insists that it operates in a manner that is impartial, did everything in its power to give Hillary Clinton an unfair advantage and sabotage her opponent, Bernie Sanders. So the fact that Hillary Clinton won more votes than Bernie doesn't mean that the primary couldn't have been rigged. That point really is moot. Again, these votes were won in part because the DNC and the media and everyone gave her an unfair advantage. That's what we're saying. And when it comes to this idea that the DNC at the time offered Bernie Sanders the same joint fundraising agreement as Hillary Clinton, for the DNC chairman to say this, it's incredibly disingenuous because Tom Perez knows that's not the case. This was an unorthodox joint fundraising agreement that was not like all other joint fundraising agreements. Hillary Clinton, because of this document, was allowed to take full control of the DNC prior to her winning the nomination, which is something that doesn't happen. You're supposed to take control of the DNC once you win the nomination. That's not what happened. And Donna Brazile explains why Tom Perez is wrong.
The Sanders campaign set up a joint fundraising account as well, but they chose not to put money in it. But they also chose to allow the DNC to control what little funds they did put in it. This was a separate, what this was an additional memorandum.
Right, but they were offered that same thing. Here's the email. If you're raising significantly more than the amount to cover the voter file for the DNC staff would be happy to chat with the Sanders team and come to an understanding about the best way to use those funds to prepare for the general election at the DNC. So they were offered a similar chance.
George, when I found out the reason why the chair of the party, the chair of the Democratic National Committee, could not spend the funds, I found the agreement myself. This is the agreement they put out. This is the agreement I found. And what I tried to do, George, was to work within the parameters of this agreement so that I could hire staff, so that I could spend money that we raised, and so that I could help Hillary and Tim Kaine and all of the other Democrats win. As for any agreements or side agreements they had with Senator Sanders, I've never seen that before, George.
So when Tom Perez says that Bernie Sanders was offered the same type of joint fundraising agreement as Hillary Clinton's team was offered, He's outright lying. I don't think I should even call it disingenuous because he's just straight up lying. He's the DNC chairman. He has access to this memo. He knows what that document states. He could read it if he wanted to, and I'm sure he did read it. But what he's doing is gaslighting all of Bernie Sanders supporters and progressives. But when it comes to Tom Perez, basically reflecting on what Donna Brazile's bombshell really revealed, well, in his deluded mind, he was actually able to perform enough mental gymnastics to arrive at the conclusion that it was actually Hillary Clinton who was the real victim.
When Hillary Clinton won the nomination, the DNC handed her insufficient and just substandard tools for success. And and by contrast, the Republican National Committee had invested significant amounts of money in technology, and they beat us at our own game.
So according to Tom Perez, the DNC failed not because they rigged the primary against a candidate that would have actually beaten Donald Trump. They failed because they didn't help Hillary Clinton beat Donald Trump more when she actually won the nomination. So according to Tom Perez, the deck was really stacked against Hillary Clinton, not Bernie Sanders. I guess outraising Donald Trump by a 2-to-1 margin wasn't enough. I guess running against the most unpopular presidential candidate in American history, who also happened to be a reality TV show star, wasn't enough. I guess all of the consultants that were on her campaign's payroll that did propaganda on her behalf in the media wasn't enough either, because at the end of the day, the true victim is Hillary Clinton, according to Tom Perez. Unbelievable. But look, Hillary Clinton, regardless if Tom Perez or any Democratic Party establishment loyalists want to think so, she's not the victim. Hillary Clinton is not the victim. And you know what? The real victim isn't even Bernie Sanders. It's his supporters who spent hours and days of their time phone banking for Bernie and canvassing for Bernie. They poured their lives into this campaign, and you stole that nomination away from them. It's progressives. It is ordinary voters that the DNC fucked over. So if you want to know how a real leader responds to these allegations from Donna Brazile, this is what a real leader says. This is what the deputy DNC chairman, Keith Ellison, said. We must heed the call for our party to enact real reforms that ensure a fair, open, and impartial nominating process in elections to come. Donna Brazile's account cannot simply be dismissed. Well, you did dismiss her account, Tom. So, since you dismissed her account and you're not even willing to consider the evidence that just came out, that you probably already had access to, you must resign. If you truly care about the party like you say you do, then you have to step down and allow someone who actually has the potential to reunite both warring wings of the party, and that's Keith Ellison. It's not you. So if you truly care about the party, resign.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.